Garth Brooks. What if the man who sold more records than Elvis Presley was, at the exact same time, one of the loneliest guys in America? Sit with that for a second. Sold-out stadiums, screaming fans, a trophy case that would make most artists weep with envy. And still, somehow, coming home to a marriage that was quietly falling apart, a mother he'd lose too soon, and a legal storm decades later that would threaten to undo everything he built. This is the real story of Garth Brooks, not just the hits, but the price tag nobody saw on the receipt. Let's start at the beginning, because the beginning tells you almost everything you need to know about how this man was built. Garth Brooks, full name Troy Garth Brooks, came into the world on February 7, 1962, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He was the baby of a blended family of 6 kids, growing up in the small town of Yukon, just outside Oklahoma City. Now here's the thing people forget. Music wasn't some accident that happened to him later in life. It was baked into the house from day one. His mother, Colleen Carroll, had actually been a working country singer back in the 1950s. She cut records for Capitol, she appeared on television. She wasn't some stage mom living through her kid, she'd actually done the thing herself. His father, Troy Raymond Brooks Jr., was a different animal entirely. He worked as a draftsman in the oil business, and on the side, he played guitar and taught his youngest son his very first chords. Picture Friday nights at the Brooks house. No television marathon, no scrolling on a phone. Every single kid had to get up and perform something. Sing a song, do a little skit, whatever. It wasn't optional. And out of that came 2 very different forces pulling at young Garth. His mom was the dreamer, the one who told him he could fly if he wanted to. His dad was the anchor, the one who reminded him that flying takes a ridiculous amount of work, and nobody's handing you wings for free. Hold on to that tension, because it explains basically his entire career. Funny enough though, music wasn't even his first love as a teenager. Sports were. He played football, baseball, ran track, the whole athletic package. He was good enough at track and field, specifically the javelin throw, to land a scholarship at Oklahoma State University. He graduated in 1984 with a degree in advertising, which honestly tells you his dad's practical streak had rubbed off on him. But college is also where things started to shift. While at OSU, he started playing local clubs with a fellow student and eventual roommate, a guy named Ty England, and audiences responded to him in a way that a javelin throw never could. So in 1985, 23 years old, he loads up and drives to Nashville to give this music thing a real shot. And Nashville, being Nashville, chewed him up almost instantly. The rejection hit so hard, so fast, that he turned around and drove home in under 24 hours. Not weeks, not days, hours. That's how brutal that first trip was. Most people would take that as a sign from the universe to hang it up. He didn't. He went home, licked his wounds, married his college girlfriend Sandy Mall in 1986, and kept gigging around Oklahoma, waiting for round 2. Round 2 came in 1987, when he and Sandy packed up and moved to Nashville for good this time. Every major label passed on him, every single one, but he kept showing up, kept playing, kept meeting people, until one night in 1988, he performed at a songwriters showcase at the legendary Bluebird Cafe. Sitting in that crowd was a Capitol Records executive named Lynn Schultz, who had actually already passed on Brooks once before. He wasn't even there for Garth. He was there to scout somebody else who never bothered to show up. Instead, he watched this guy perform, walked up afterward, and basically admitted, "Maybe I missed something here." The next day, Brooks had a deal with Capitol. His self-titled debut dropped in April of 1989, and it introduced the world to something country radio hadn't really heard before. This blend of old-school honky-tonk storytelling smashed together with arena rock energy. It gave him his first #1 single, and the album climbed to #2 on the country charts. Solid start, but nothing could have prepared anyone for what came next. 1990's No Fences didn't just sell records, it rewrote the rulebook. 23 weeks at #1 on the country albums chart. It gave the world his signature anthem, the one that basically became a barroom national anthem for an entire generation. And then there was The Thunder Rolls, a song with a music video so intense, dealing with domestic violence, that it got flat-out banned from country music TV. And you know what banning a song does? It makes everybody desperate to see it. The controversy didn't hurt him. It cemented him as an artist who wasn't afraid to swing at something uncomfortable. On stage, he flipped the whole concept of what a country show was supposed to look like. Wireless headset mics so he could sprint across the stage instead of standing behind a mic stand like a statue. Ropes, rafters, smashed guitars, pyro, the kind of theatrical, full-body rock and roll chaos you'd expect from a stadium rock band, not a guy in a cowboy hat. And fans ate it up by the millions. By the time the dust settled, he'd become the best-selling solo artist in American history, surpassing Elvis himself in certified domestic sales. He's the only artist ever to score 9 separate albums certified diamond, meaning 10 million plus copies sold, for 9 different records. 2 Grammys, 17 American Music Awards, 7 Entertainer of the Year trophies from the Country Music Association, a record nobody else touches. Now here's where the story stops being a highlight reel and starts being something a lot more human. Go back to how he met Sandy Mal in the first place, because it's a genuinely wild story. He was working as a bouncer at a bar in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and had to break up a fight in the women's bathroom, where Sandy, of all things, had somehow gotten her fist wedged into a wood panel. Not exactly a meet-cute you'd script for a movie, but it worked. She wasn't dazzled by his big dreams. She was grounded and unimpressed by ambition for its own sake, and that's exactly what drew him to her. They got married in May of 1986, right before he made his do-or-die move back to Nashville. She was signing up for a life with a guy who'd already been rejected once, and was about to risk it all over again. That takes guts. Together, they had 3 daughters: Taylor, born in 1992, August, born in 1994, and Allie, born in 1996. And by every account, those girls became the absolute center of his universe. But here's the cruel math of fame. Between 1989 and 1993, as his career detonated into global superstardom, he was on the road something like 300 days a year. Sandy was essentially a single parent with a famous husband. School drop-offs, doctor's visits, birthday parties, midnight fevers. She handled all of it, alone, while he was living inside sold-out arenas on the other side of the country. Sandy has spoken about this directly, saying that when he'd come home from long stretches on tour, it genuinely felt like she was welcoming home a different man than the one who left. The fame didn't just change his schedule, it changed him. He's admitted this himself, openly, that he got so swept up in the whirlwind of adoring crowds and constant motion that he lost sight of how hard things had become for the person holding the household together back home. 8-10 weeks away at a stretch, and then coming home not to rest, but to award shows and industry events, pulling him right back out the door. By November of 2000, the marriage had cracked beyond repair, and he filed for divorce, citing the classic legal phrase, irreconcilable differences. Fans who'd assumed this was the perfect country music power couple were blindsided. The divorce was finalized in December 2001, and the settlement was massive, reportedly around $125 million, making it one of the most expensive celebrity divorces on record at the time. But money never fixes years of emotional distance. What actually held that family together afterward was something more impressive than any paycheck. He and Sandy built an almost military precision co-parenting schedule, trading off duties every single day at 7 a.m. and 6 p.m., seeing each other constantly to keep their daughters' lives stable. However bruised the marriage ended up, the parenting held. And if you think the divorce was the hardest chapter, it wasn't even close to the last gut punch coming his way. His mother, Colleen Carroll, the woman who'd literally handed him his first taste of music, died of cancer in August of 1999. And this loss didn't just hurt him. It fundamentally rerouted his career. It hit him so hard that it became the direct reason he walked away from music entirely for years. He simply couldn't imagine performing without knowing she was somewhere out there listening. Then in 2010, his father passed away too. The disciplined ex-Marine and oilfield worker, who'd taught him that nothing good comes without sacrifice. Losing him meant losing the last steady male hand that had shaped who Garth became. Fast forward to April of 2025, and another devastating loss landed. His longtime songwriting partner and mentor, Larry Bastian, died at 90 years old. Bastian co-wrote some of the songs that defined his entire career, tracks that touched millions of people. Brooks later described him publicly as a great man, a cowboy, a poet, and a true friend. Someone who'd essentially taken him in as a student the moment he arrived in Nashville. That's not just losing a collaborator. That's losing a mentor and a piece of your own creative DNA. There have been closer calls too. Back in February 2021, his second wife, Trisha Yearwood, caught a brutal, serious respiratory illness that had him genuinely terrified he might lose her. He stayed by her side the entire time, refusing to leave despite his own risk of catching it. He's talked about how he's not a guy who puts stock in horoscopes or lucky stars aligning, but he does believe in the power of prayer, and he credits exactly that for getting them through it. And back in 2006, wildfires tore through Oklahoma and threatened the family ranch directly, the land holding generations of his family's history. He had to sit back and watch from a distance while firefighters fought to save it. The property survived. The fear didn't leave so easily. Any one of these losses would be enough to break most people. His mother, his father, his mentor, a wildfire threatening his roots, nearly losing his wife. And he kept moving forward anyway. But the toughest fight of all might have arrived last, in a courtroom instead of a hospital or a graveside. In September of 2024, Brooks filed a preemptive federal lawsuit in Mississippi under the anonymous name John Doe, trying to get ahead of a legal threat before it went public. In his filing, he claimed a former employee was attempting to extort millions of dollars from him by threatening to go public with what he called fabricated stories. He later told the press he'd been hounded for months with threats and lies, comparing it to having a weapon waved in his face. Weeks later, in October, the woman, a former hair and makeup artist who'd worked for both him and Trisha Yearwood, filed her own lawsuit in California Superior Court, alleging that Brooks had assaulted her on multiple occasions, including during a 2019 trip tied to a Grammy tribute event. Brooks has denied every single allegation and continues to maintain his innocence. What followed was a legal tug-of-war over jurisdiction and anonymity that dragged on for years rather than months. Legal observers criticized his preemptive Mississippi filing as a maneuver to try to unmask his accuser or pressure her into silence, and the backlash became a genuine public relations storm. When she was publicly identified through the California filing, Brooks amended his own case to name her too, arguing she'd forfeited her right to anonymity. Her legal team fired back hard, accusing him of exposing her identity out of spite. In May of 2025, a federal judge in Mississippi ruled key motions in the case moot, letting the California case move forward. And as recently as mid-2026, appellate courts were still wrestling with the anonymity question, meaning the discovery process, depositions, evidence gathering, all of it, just kept grinding on with no trial date in sight. This wasn't even his first brush with public controversy, for what it's worth. Back in 1999, at the absolute peak of his fame, he baffled everyone by inventing a fictional alter ego named Chris Gaines, a moody alt-rock persona complete with a soul patch and a falsetto. It bombed, sold a fraction of what his real albums moved, and to this day, he barely acknowledges it happened. And in 2014, a standoff over concert permits in Dublin, Ireland, led him to cancel 5 sold-out stadium shows entirely, rather than compromise on scaling back to 3 nights, leaving 400,000 ticket holders out in the cold and costing the local economy tens of millions. So where does that leave him now, at 64 years old, with a legal cloud still hanging overhead? Honestly, still working, still showing up. During his years of self-imposed retirement, after he stepped away from full-time touring to raise his daughters, he lived about as unglamorous a life as you can imagine for a global superstar. Driving carpool, packing school lunches, coaching youth sports, sitting through school plays, like every other exhausted parent in the bleachers. He'd promised himself he wouldn't return to the road full-time until his youngest daughter turned 18, and he kept that promise. His relationship with Trisha Yearwood actually predates his fame entirely. They first met back in 1987 in a songwriter's studio, recorded a demo together, and stayed just friends while both were married to other people. Years later, after both marriages ended, that friendship turned into something more. He proposed to her on stage at a venue in Bakersfield, California, and they married in December of 2005. They've been together ever since, through all of it, the wildfires, the pandemic scare, and now this lawsuit hanging over his head for going on 2 years. Sources close to him have described the ongoing legal battle as the single most stressful stretch of his entire life. More draining, even, than the chaos of his meteoric rise decades ago. And yet, in the middle of all that pressure, he still took the stage in Milwaukee in June of 2026 for 2 sold-out shows, his first performances in that city in over a decade, and by all accounts, the crowd energy reminded him exactly why he fell in love with this in the first place. He was also set to headline a massive show at Hyde Park in London that same month, his first major UK performance in roughly 3 decades. Big stage, big anticipation, and reportedly some real nerves underneath the bravado, given everything swirling around him legally. When he's not on a stage, he spends a lot of his time around his own bar and entertainment venue on Broadway, in Nashville, greeting fans, supporting local musicians, staying rooted in the community that made him who he is. But make no mistake, the unresolved lawsuit still weighs on him daily. Insiders say he believes he'll ultimately be vindicated, but the sheer drag of the process, the not knowing, the fear that his audience might quietly drift away even while people tell him the support is still there. That anxiety doesn't just disappear because the lights come on and the crowd starts singing along. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. This is a guy who built an empire out of pure, relentless hustle, who lost the 2 people who shaped him most, who watched a marriage collapse under the weight of his own success, who's now fighting for his name in a courtroom instead of fighting for a chart position. He's not invincible. He never was. He's just a guy from Yukon, Oklahoma who kept getting back up. If this kind of deep dive story is your thing, you know what to do. Hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.